Hey friends, welcome back to Generator. And believe it or not, here we are at episode 20. My guest this week is Pratik Naik. Pratik is among the world's best commercial retouchers, and his work has appeared in Vogue and Elle and Harper's Bazaar and countless other high-end magazines. Besides being a photographer himself, he's also an accomplished educator with courses like the Retouching series, which is a cornerstone for anybody that wants to get into retouching. He's also the quintessential entrepreneur, having a line of digital products that started with Infinite Color Panel and has expanded to be an entire suite of tools, all with the aim of helping you get better at retouching. But what I love about Pratik is that he's what I would call a futurist. He's always curious and always researching things that are on the forefront of technology. One of his passions lately has been artificial intelligence, and he's even created a course with Felix Kuhns called The Future of Photo, where they talk about AI and its application in the creative process. In this conversation, we spend most of our time talking about AI and our predictions on how it's going to affect the photography community. We easily could have talked for hours about this, but with time and attention spans being what they are, we limited it to an hour. So let's get started with an episode I'm calling Through the Lens of Tomorrow with my guest, Pratik Naik. I've never known how to start any of these things, but I'm just happy to have you here.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. I've always loved having like conversations like this because these are those moments you kind of look back on and be like, oh yeah, I remember we did that thing. And like some people will bring it up in conversation later, like, oh yeah, I remember I saw your interview with Matt and such a great podcast and kind of stuff. So love it.
Well, there's the promo. That's all I'm going to use, that little snippet for the rest of my life. No, I think you're right. You know, we were having this conversation at the Portrait Masters, on that last night we all stayed before we all caught the plague. And it was great. We were talking about movies. Was it the Terminator that you watch all the time? Is that the one?
Yes, that's
but it's Terminator 2, right?
2, yeah.
Terminator 2, yeah. And to continue our conversation, we were talking about our favorite movies, what we like to watch for visuals, and just the thing you can always put in the background. And mine is the new Dune.
Yeah.
The Denis Villeneuve. I can never pronounce his name, the director. But the new Dune, not the old Dune.
Yes.
And I've been watching that basically every night since September. And I'm getting to that point. The ADHD dopamine is starting to wear off.
You have to get a new fixation.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I will find something for the next year and watch that every day in and day out. Speaking of which, you health hack a lot, right?
Yeah, I try
So
to.
what have you been doing with that lately? I know you've always experimented with sleep and health and vitamins. And where are you with that these days?
I have to say I'm all over the place. Like, I think the biggest thing that has always been tried and true is when you realize a lot of issues stem from stress and the causes of stress, one being things like your adrenal glands and adrenal fatigue. So I always think, I tell people, make sure you always have good source of vitamin C, whether you're having oranges every day or do you supplement every day. And things like B12, I think are common. I think those are staples for me. If I don't have them, I can tell a difference in my energy and my mood. And also magnesium. I think those are like biggest things that I think every creative in general should take, because I think, we always go through very high stress periods and stuff, and we just need to keep our bodies nourished in a way that we're as stable as we can be, given our own unique circumstances. So those are my biggest takeaways.
Yeah, the vitamin B is huge for energy for me. Magnesium has been helping me sleep, but vitamin D as well, right? Especially this
Oh,
time of
yeah.
year where we're never outside. It's 20 degrees here in Maine and dark at, 1 in the afternoon. So I found that I had been skipping my vitamin D for, I don't know, the past couple of months. Didn't realize it, ran out of it, didn't think to go
Yeah.
pick up some more. And I was like, it's not going to affect me that much because it was the summertime.
Yeah.
And then I just really started to realize like mopey, just
Oh, yes.
anxious, like that feeling of just general malaise. And
Yes.
I've started adding in the vitamin D since I don't go outside a lot. I sit in front of a computer in a dark room.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, wow, that big shiny thing in the sky actually gives you a little bit of energy. But if I can get that
Yeah.
energy in a pill, again, fantastic.
Did you ever get tested for it, or was it just something that you kind of like, oh, I'm gonna just take it and see how I feel?
No, I get a blood panel every year
Yeah.
to check on a lot of stuff. Vitamin D was one of the things that I was very deficient in. Testosterone was another one that I was very deficient in. And once I worked with my doctor to get the right dosages of everything,
Yeah.
then it's like a switch flipped in terms of
Interesting.
energy and focus and capability to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was a lot of work of trying to describe symptoms and then get the blood work done and figure out the whole plan forward. But
Yeah.
man, it's worth it. It's so worth it to do that stuff.
Is that interesting where you don't realize these things, and even if you go to a doctor and you possibly give them the symptoms that you have, they don't initially think to test on the most basic
Yeah.
things. They obviously might check your blood pressure, your blood levels, but vitamin D is a very specific test, and you should ask for it because
Yeah.
even on my last physical, they never even brought it up. You have to kind of say, "Hey, I want to get my vitamin D tested," and one of our friends, I don't know if I can mention her name or not, but she recently got her vitamin D prescribed. And also I told her, I was like, hey, did you get vitamin K2 as well prescribed?
Mhm.
Because you need K2 to ensure that vitamin D goes in the right places and
Right.
magnesium as well. And she was like, I had no idea. So she went back to her doctor and was like, yeah, you should probably take K2 as well. So yeah, good point. We probably saved a few people's like lives and happiness in this podcast already.
Well, my job is done, right? That's all
Yeah,
I do.
you're done. We're done.
This is
You're bonus now.
my cape. I don't want to say that I'm a hero, but I'm kind of a hero. Advocating for yourself is super important. So,
100%.
okay, enough with WebMD talk. Um, so the thing that we were talking about, and I can't remember if it was right around the same time, but in September or thereabouts, late September, you launched the Future of Photo with
Yes.
Felix. I immediately purchased the course because I believe
Thank
in
you.
everything that you put out. And that's not blowing smoke. It's just, I believe in everything you put
Appreciate
out.
that.
And so I went through the course and I skipped around because I know some of the things of Mid Journey, but I started skipping around and found myself immersed in
Mm,
all of these modules. First off, thank you for putting that out because
appreciate it.
from the standpoint of the creative community, being able to have everything in one place, especially for photographers,
Mhm.
was phenomenal. How has
Yeah.
the response been for the course? Are you
Yeah.
getting any specific feedback on what people are digging more than others? And I'll give you my feedback in a second.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's interesting because prior to this we had, a lot of information and experience with education and retouching. But what I found is that people, because they don't have time, they want to jump around into different parts of the course. And I thought that was important to keep steady with this one as well. One thing that I found really interesting was now that these tools keep changing, people don't know where to keep their attentions on. And so the way that we kind of designed it was intentional, where we're like, let's have a very specific case study where, you are somebody who is trying to create a mood board and then apply to a photo shoot and then also go into post production with your results. If we kept it central to that theme, we could keep people's focus on why they should learn what we're presenting. And that was the biggest kind of takeaway. Now, the feedback that also I got was, hey, how come you don't talk about any like free tools yet? And to that, I had to say, it's coming because it's going to be completely updated as time goes. Because we knew with AI, this is going to change constantly. But the other factor is the groundbreaking tools are often the ones that you have to still pay for in the beginning because if they're free, chances are it's not worth using at the moment, unfortunately. It's very difficult to find a free model, especially with image generation that has the firepower and the backing that these funded companies do. And so that's why we based it off of that. where the longevity of it just makes sense. But it's not to say in the future there's not going to be a lot more that comes from it that, might just be free for everyone. So it just depends. And that's been my biggest, I think, overall idea of how people have approached it so far. How about you?
Yeah.
Like, what was your feelings towards it?
Man, there were so many parts of this course that I really, really enjoyed, right? So I've been kind of like you with my finger on the pulse of AI for a long time and trying to jump on all the tools as soon as they come out, really explore them, figure them out. Do
Yeah.
I like it? Do I not? Forget about the conversations that you have at the end about the ethics of AI and how you
Mm.
incorporate it. And is it going to replace photographers? And I love those conversations. I won't spoil it for anybody. But then what I really loved was how in depth you went with Midjourney. Every
Mm.
single
Oh, yes.
variable that's in there. I didn't know about the image weight or really the differences between stylizing and raw and medium in there. So the deeper level of the prompts and
Mm.
all of the variables that you can put in was phenomenal for you to break it all down bit by bit. I think one of the things that you had done, it made me really laugh. Sidebar. I was watching the neural filters. I use neural filters when I'm doing a lot of stuff. And in the neural filters video where you're playing with smart portrait and smiles and eyes, and you're having the greatest time doing it. And poor Abdul, the model, is getting his face liquefied. It was wonderful to see the playful creative side, but also the reality of know what these tools are, know what they can do, don't rely on them 100%. But when you said I'm going to max this out and send it to Felix and see if he notices, and you start cracking up, that made the entire course worthwhile for me. It really made me laugh.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I remember going through that and thinking, do I talk about the stuff that is just crap? And I was like, yes, I should, because people really need to know not everything works as advertised, and some of it's just hilarious. And it kind of like makes you realize, okay, we're not really there yet in a lot of these instances. People shouldn't be terrified that everything's going to be done right away without any
Yeah.
input from you.
I think, one of the other things that I pulled away, and this is totally, oh God, I'm so off topic, but in watching you do everything in Midjourney and you're producing images and then upscaling, saving them to a folder, and then using them as inspiration prompts, whether you're blending or whether you're just drawing variations from some of these images. I was so drawn to your Finder sidebar and how organized you are on your own desktop. It fascinated me. And I went in and did that to my own Finder sidebar on a Mac. And I
Oh,
was adding all
that's
these folders because I can never find anything.
yes,
So
yes.
like you inspired me to be more organized through a course that you put out. It was really, really funny that was the thing that I focused on in, some of these videos. But
Can we talk about that for a second? Because I
yeah,
have to say,
absolutely.
I do that a lot. Where I watch people's videos. I even watch you, for example, and I see like how your mannerisms are and how you talk to people, or like how you work on a computer, and like when you have these questions come up and you're like, how did you think of that question based on what they said? Always analytical about stuff, and we always learn these things that are secondary learning principles. And what Matt is referring to is if you just see any like trailer of the video, you'll see it. But in my Finder, basically you can save, your shortcuts and where they go to. But I have little dividers because Mac doesn't have like lines between folders. So I have these little folders that I create on my desktop that have just dashes as the name, and then I put that as a shortcut because then it acts like a divider. So then if I'm working on like photo projects, I'm like, let me go to the photo project shortcut section. And like, let me go to the retouching shortcut section. The thing I wish Macs had was on that shortcut section, I wish you could rename the folder without renaming the original folder, and that would keep you way more organized.
Could you not create an alias on the desktop and then shortcut to the alias?
That's a brilliant idea. I never thought about that. We're gonna have
Again,
to try it out. Okay, gotta go.
again, hero solving the world's problems.
There you go.
But no, I saw those dividers, and that's what drew me in. I was like, how is he? Oh, he's creating folders. So
Yeah.
yes, if and I encourage you to go and get this course, but you'll be able to see the
Just
sidebar.
waiting for the contribution.
Yeah, totally driving sales up just because of your organization skills. No, but I as a photographer, it's super important for us to have access to our materials really quickly. And I find, I keep everything in Dropbox, and I've got pretty good organization system in there. However, what I really like is having folders, all my personal branding, all my fine art, every article that I've been in,
Yeah.
reels that I've made. I like having that stuff on instant access. And I've never really had a quick way to do it outside of a lot of shortcuts on the desktop. So having that structure really made a lot of sense to me of having it all in one place.
I
So I think, that is certainly helping me be able to find things faster. The sheer number of terabytes of data that I have is
oh
astounding.
yes.
And that doesn't count the Rubbermaid containers full of hard drives in my
Ah,
closet.
gosh, can there just be a better way? I know I still struggle with that organization of the hard drive situation because I'm like, but then what if I'm traveling and what if I do backup before I travel and what if I want a solution that I can, it's just a mess. And speaking of organization, I think having our creative minds and how our minds are mapped in multiple directions
Yeah.
allows me to also figure out what content to keep in a course and what I should be talking about, even though I really, don't know the gamut of everyone's questions. But I think that's a superpower we have as creatives. We are able to see the tangible, directions people can think about questions and then really integrate that into a course structure. And I think that's why I like educating other creatives is because I think we all think very similarly and how we learn is also very similar. We're visual people, but how we structure things are similar too.
What you're saying in there as well is there's an element of experience that you have to have before you can become an educator so that you can
Mm.
anticipate some of those questions. One of the things that I see a lot happening now are all these courses popping up, not necessarily in photography, just courses in general. It seems like
Yeah.
everybody has suddenly become an educator or an instructor. Johnny Edward and I had this conversation a few weeks back. We were talking about how saturated the market is right now for a lot of these courses. But
Mhm.
what you're talking about really is thinking through once you are at a point where you think you can start creating courses. It is
Mm.
very important to think through who the audience is and how they're
Yes.
going to consume that content. I know
Mhm.
for me, when I'm developing my courses, right, I've got a course on podcasting, course on video, and the podcasting course, I tried to think through, all right, what are the elements that I need to break down in every single step? Because I can't take anything for granted that the people that are viewing or consuming it are going to know what I'm talking about. So
Yes.
it's really easy for us to get caught up in all the stuff that we've known for 10 or 20 years and just spit out a condensed version of that and hope that people know. But instead, you really have to think through, all right, well, if I'm going to talk about neural filters, I should probably talk a little bit about AI. Maybe I should talk a little bit about how retouching is done. And then think about you just keep working your way backwards till you get to a point and
Yes.
say, all right, this is enough of a beginning for this course, and then move forward.
Yes.
The up and down side of that is that you have a ton of stuff you can talk about and that you have to condense that down, right? And that's the hard part is like, I can leave this out, but do I want to leave it out? Right. But you
Yes.
also don't want to
Yes.
have 168 hours of content in one course.
I'm using AI now more to help me clarify those things because I think of AI as somebody who's almost like a neurotypical person who can understand everything I'm trying to say and then condense it down to be like, hey, I think what you're trying to say. It's like an ADHD translator for me.
Oh my God, that's
I'm
the
just
best.
I go into it and I'm like, hey, listen, I have this course I want to make, and these are the topics I'm going to talk about. What else should I add in between here? What are some of these things that I'm missing? And then I talk to it like a person. And what I found is at the end of the day, I feel like I've used less brain power, but I've gained more knowledge. Like I've become wiser, thinking less, and it's about this efficiency aspect of it. It's about getting better, and this is how we start using these tools to help figure out what direction we should go in, stay focused, but also to clarify, condense, expand all this stuff. Even emails, like I'll start writing an email and I'll say, you know what, I'm not good at corporate speak enough. So can you make it more normal? And then it like actually responds back, and I use a lot of it. So I don't know. Do you find that similar issue? Do you use the same
Like
way too?
I do it exactly the same way for various parts of what I'm doing. And very much like you, I will write something, and I'm a decent writer, but
Yeah.
I look at, and I tend to be, you can tell, verbose. So my one question, hey Pratik, would you like to come over, becomes, hey Pratik, I'm going to be making dinner, and I'm going to start with a casserole, and I'm going to do this. Would you be interested in coming over and maybe, right? So verbose, way too long emails. So I often use AI to break that down, to condense it, make it sound a little bit better, sum it up, right? When I'm
Yeah.
using it for courses, I try to type in as much detail as I can, and I say, produce an outline from this. Okay, now
Mm.
that I have the outline, I take that first topic if I agree with it. Let's say it's microphone choice. I'll go
Mm.
in and I'll put in all my information about microphones that I know. And then I say, all right, let's enhance this. Let's fill in the gaps. Hey, can you talk a little bit more about the difference between condenser microphones and dynamic microphones? Like
Yeah.
you were talking to a third grader. And I
Yeah.
try to, give it that input so that the information that it gives me, I can then massage and put in my own voice. So
Mm.
it's this kind of symbiotic relationship that I have with ChatGPT where I give it raw data, it spits out something more refined. I take that and then it polishes that up. And we kind of go back and forth in this dance until I feel like I have the information that I need. And then I go to the
Mm.
next step. Right.
Yes.
So I like using it that way.
Do you find that, and I tell people this all the time, where they come to me and they say, I don't really use AI yet. It's like 50-50 right now. And I'm like, why don't you? Like, can you tell me some of the reasons? And they say that, it sounds very robotic, so I gave up.
Right.
And to that I say, don't give up on your first try. It's as if you're training somebody new that hasn't really worked with you before. You're
100%.
massaging it a little bit. And instead of like just giving up on ChatGPT, you can try a couple of things, being like, be the tone of voice. You can tell it, I want this in a specific tone of voice. You can input your text sample and have it mimic that tone of voice. I also tell people use other services like Google Bard or use Cloud. Cloud is fantastic. I personally prefer that over like ChatGPT at this current moment, just because it's trained on more creative humanistic writing style. So I tell people don't give up on it yet, because instead of looking at this as like a luxury, we have to now think of it as a standard thing in our life. It's like the camera that we use. It's
Mhm.
this thing that it's gonna be there forever and get better. So it's not just a luxurious tool that will be there at its current state forever. It's gonna keep improving. So I think of it as a necessity that
Yeah.
we have to have now, right? Like I don't know. That's
I,
kind of what my thinking has been.
I look at it the same way. I think it's like driving a car, right? Some people are going to just drive from here to the grocery store. Some people are going to become F1 drivers, right? Those are your prompt engineers. And then you have the folks that are going to take the subway in New York because they're like, fuck driving. I'm not going to drive anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's similar insofar as yes, it will be an ever-present part of our lives. Your choice is how much you want to use it or not. And
Yes.
for me, I know that anything that can increase my efficiency, anything that can give me more time back in my day and
Mm.
reduce the amount of brain cycles that I have to use is
Yes.
fine by me. I started doing AI copywriting back when there's a Jasper is one of the commercial AI functions out there. And I was using it when it was called Jarvis a couple of years back. And it was the early days. It didn't write really well, but it was okay. And most of the products that are out there now have become really good. However, there's been, a dependency on a specific model, a language model or a computational model that isolates some companies from others. And one of the bigger topics that's being talked about, especially in the last week, is interoperability of models. And
Mm.
as some of these tools start to draw from different engines, different models of AI, what it's doing is producing more natural, more usable content, reducing the possibility that some of those engines will be down, right?
Mm.
So if they change privacy controls or if they get overwhelmed, right, you might not have access to that. Whereas some of these companies that are using interoperability of these different models are combining it all and basically
Yeah.
creating redundancy. And
Mm.
that is the thing that really turns me on, right? As all of these systems start to work together, it becomes more seamless, it becomes less cumbersome, it becomes more natural. And I'm finding that as I start to use, like you, different models, different locations to fine tune content, that there are some that are better than others. And Chat
Yeah.
GPT is not the end all be all, but I'm starting to find that as you use different plugins or go to different places like Bard, that you can find something that better suits your style and what it is, the
Yeah.
task that you're working on.
And that's the best part about it is I think with the advancement of this and how we begin to use computers, like you said, the style in which we use these tools will ultimately shape the direction of how these tools and our mechanism changes. Like I was thinking about this from a human history perspective. Like right now, because we have computers and we're kind of still in the early days, we have these peripherals like keyboards and screens and stuff like that. But eventually, the keyboards will disappear, the phones will disappear. It's going to be it's leaning toward more organic, of a interface. And these tools will continue to keep changing till we start becoming more symbiotic with, unfortunately, these advancements. And who knows what the future is going to hold. But I just feel excited for the next year or two. And every day I see these advancements that don't only just incrementally change, but I feel like they just double. It's a weird time. I've never seen anything like it where the pace of change is so fast that it's hard to even acclimatize before the next thing comes through. And it's a weird feeling for me. I want to talk about that with you. It's like, how do you feel weird right now? Do you feel normal or excited? What is your feeling generally about everything going on with this whole scenario?
Right now, yeah, I feel weird, right? But I'm also smack dab middle poster child for Gen X. So I've seen the world before the internet and now I've seen it after the internet. And I remember like growing up in Boston around the MIT area, I'd always see like real nerds out there doing weird stuff. Back in the 80s and early 90s, I would see, engineers walking around with glasses with a monitor, over their eye, and they're using this keyboard down here while they're walking forward and they're coding on. I was like, we're 5 years away from robots. That's the way I felt, right? So now I'm seeing it where, here we are 35 years later, and it's really starting to come about, right? It's Oculus, right? You've got all this artificial augmented reality. You've got all this virtual reality stuff.
Yeah.
And it kind of stems from what that weird guy was doing walking through Boston with a thing on his eye. How I feel about it, it's adapt or die, change or don't. You kind of have to pick a side. Being wishy-washy in the middle is not going to
Mm.
give you any advantage.
Right.
Either stick to your guns and, kind of be off grid, or accept that AI is going to be part of your life, right?
Yes.
And look how quickly people accepted Alexa and Siri,
Yeah.
right? We're like, oh, we don't want to talk to this. And now kids are yelling out, Alexa, put on Frozen, You had posted today on Facebook on one of your accounts, what is the technological innovation that you think will be there by 2030, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I read through some of the comments, and there was great stuff in there about what is going to be
Yes.
the most outstanding technological innovation. I was reading through it, and it was very much the responses were around robots, using things in the tools that we have, maybe some self-driving cars. Was there one standout comment in there that
Yeah.
really got you and you were like, oh, this person's onto something?
So this whole topic actually stemmed from the news. I think it was like not even a week ago about Sam Altman,
Sure.
this open CI's firing, and him coming back to the company, and then suddenly the speculation about why and what they had behind the scenes and the level of achievement advancement they made, and it made me realize something. Like the way that they're training these models now are very similar to how humans think. And so it's just now, I feel like we're at the precipice of witnessing the birth of something greater than us, or great as us. And that means we have to now begin asking these really weird questions. My brain went to this other place, like, hold on a minute. If we are very much closer to something that could be better than us or just as good as us in many of these aspects, what does that mean for the world? Because in my whole life, I always imagined that in 20 years from now, the world would more or less be similar, granted incremental updates as we've seen in technology, but not to the point where we're going to have to worry about another form of intelligence. And then it made me realize, okay, so if that's the case, if no one has to work anymore, what does the post-economic world society look like? Are we going to go back to the medieval ages and barter for swords and stuff? Like, what does money mean? What do banks mean? What does investing mean? And then because everything's connected, and I was like, either we shift and adapt. But I think ultimately in the next between 2030, I would hope that the biggest change we see in a positive mindset is things like cure for all illnesses, especially because these models are starting to map out the human genome and all the proteins. And there's these specific algorithms that map all this stuff out that humans would have taken forever to do, and it's already done. And so that just has to mean that we're going to figure out so many of these other issues. So hopefully that just means that we have answers to questions about our own personal health and well-being and everything, kind of what we talked about in the beginning. You could walk into something and it just figures out, hey, this is what you should get tested on, this is what you should consider looking up based on the symptoms that I see from how your eyes are dilated and your skin looks and your hair issues and all that kind of stuff. You should go this route and that route, and it'll just mean better prosperity for us. Granted, it obviously depends on who has control of it and all that stuff. So, and the biases that are placed with everything that's being trained. So I think for me, it's the biggest double-edged sword in history. And thinking about 2030, and like I told you, how our creative minds can go all over the place and many possible opportunities and aspects, it kind of worries me. It makes me at least feel more alive than I've ever felt.
Sure.
Just because I keep in touch with the news now. I every day I look at what advancements are coming, because then it can give me more of a clue over where we're going and extrapolate from there. But that's kind of what my open-ended thinking was. Yeah. How do you feel?
Oh, medical was going to be the thing that I, put in that thread, but I really wanted to have this conversation with you first. The ability to predetermine your susceptibility for certain diseases, your ability to read through a blood chart and have it predict what your health might be. I think those are the things that will impact us more in the short term. The flying cars and the toasters that can read your mind, all that sort of stuff, that, the Jetson stuff is going to happen eventually. I probably won't be around for that. However, I think there it is, right? How do we extend life? So if we're able to use AI to a point where it's helping us increase our health and our longevity, well, now that also plays into actuarial charts for insurance, right? And your whole thing about investments, all of these peripheral and secondary and tertiary effects for one industry. And I think with that, it will be really, really interesting. My biggest concern, regardless of what it is the human reliance and the lack of critical thinking in daily life, right? And this is why I love talking to you, because you're one of these people that is always looking for input. You're always thinking a little bit differently, and you're trying to talk to others not to say, look how smart I am, or I want to draw something out of
No.
you. It's really this curiosity, this inquisitiveness that helps drive the conversation forward. Do you think we've lost the ability to think experimentally, to think critically, to imagine things because we are so inundated by social media and we're told what to think and how to think and what to do and
Yes.
where to go and what to wear? Do you think we've lost that ability to think for ourselves?
I feel like sometimes when I see really great artists like you and all of our creative community, one thing that I think goes in hand is our collective ability to stay curious. And, when we have this ability to stay curious, it keeps our mind open and pliable because very quickly, as you've seen and many of us probably have even gone through, is the less curious our minds stay, the more we are subject to the possibility of having a fixed mindset,
Yeah.
and not being able to really deviate from any possibilities than what we already know. And that's so dangerous now more than ever because the second you do that, the algorithms get you and you're in this little rabbit hole of one directional thought. And then B, just because of how society is currently with how much we have to work just to get by and all this stuff, it really keeps us shackled, to not be able to have time to even ponder. And now more than ever, I think, the idea of freedom isn't just necessarily like how much money you have, but like the freedom of mindset, like being able to really get in a position of thinking critically and, like you said, openly about what the future might bring. And that to me, I think is the biggest like sense of freedom to have that ability. And I do want to encourage a lot of people. And that's why sometimes I pose questions the way that I do, because I want people to think like, I don't want to spell the point out,
Right.
but if I'm 2 steps behind the point, it will encourage them to get to the point by themselves. And typically, as you know, when you tell someone, hey, you're wrong or whatever, or you even push against their opinion, they're gonna be more resilient in their own opinion. But the second you get them to get to their own point, it'll change their whole mindset. And I want that for people more than anything. That's kind of what my thing is. And curiosity is a funny thing. Like it gives you opportunity and clarity, but at the same time, it's also very confusing because you see so many different ways that you could go. And even as an artist, and I'm sure you can relate too, like we want to do all these things. Like we're like, oh, that would be amazing. The idea of it fascinates us sometimes more than the execution. And so we don't commit. And so our friends are like, why aren't you committing? Like you said you want to do it. Why aren't you doing it? And it's so hard to explain why.
Right.
But the same reason that we are not as committed is the same reason we have these amazing ideas. It's the same scope. I don't know, like the future is just strange, but I just hope people start critically thinking more than ever before. Maybe that's an exercise and a takeaway from this conversation that I want that we should encourage people is keep your mind open.
Yeah, as portrait artists, right? And not only are you a technologist and a futurist and a retouchist, but you're also a photographer. And for me, I know that as a portrait photographer, curiosity is the foundation of any connection with my clients. Having that curious mind, being able to ask questions without expectation or condition, and being able to have that conversation with someone, so you're pulling out emotion, you're guiding them through a process, you're finding out new things that might stimulate creativity in you. That curiosity is the cornerstone for me of any connection with clients. Expand that out, and you can do the same thing with your friends and your family and people on the subway that you don't know or in Starbucks. Just stay in that kind of curious, playful place, and don't be afraid to ask questions that someone might look at you a little sideways, because you're at least asking the question. And they
Yes.
might think you're a weirdo. God knows I get that all the time. But I I'm genuinely curious in what people think about things, because I'm not so closed-minded that all of my opinions are set in stone. Change my belief. Do it. I'd love to. You might not be able to, but at least expose me to that point of view. I think a lot of us whether it's in the creative realm or not, fall out of thinking about things from a different perspective. We're so rooted in what we believe and how we want to do things. And a lot of times it's the way we've always done them, that thinking about something differently is scary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to feel fear or discomfort. So I'm not going to think differently or question. Me, all I want is that discomfort. I was born in it. I'm like Bane. I was like Dark. I was born in it. And I love being uncomfortable because I know that there's always something more to learn. And this brings me back to that question of reliance. Reliance on what we know, reliance on what we're being fed, reliance on the tools that we use every day. There has to be that curiosity so that we keep it in check, so that we're asking the right questions at the right time. Hey, this is awesome that it's going to make my banking much faster, but who's controlling that? And how much say do I have over what their rules and regulations are going to be? If I'm putting my
Yes.
stuff into Midjourney, am I sure that that's not being used by some other company and then being sold as a backdrop on on some site somewhere? I think being able to ask these questions, doing a little bit of research, a little bit of critical thinking is not a bad thing, especially at the pace that all of this is being developed.
Has there ever been a point recently that your opinion has been changed based on this principle? Like you believed something, and then after you read or you heard something or in conversation, you then change your mind about it or expanded upon it. And if it doesn't have to be anything recent, maybe the last thing you remember.
In a general sense, without a specific example, in general sense, politics constantly.
Yeah.
I'm a voracious political consumer because it's kabuki theater to me. Everything is spin, everything is false on all sides. And I just like to listen to all of it and
Yeah.
try to distill down based on my beliefs.
Yeah.
What is my opinion? What is my point of view? And then
Yes.
I always try to flip it for myself and say, all right, well, what would the other person say? And then
Yes.
when I go out and I get into conversations with friends or where I'm in a social situation and, a topic comes up, I tend to do the interviewing and ask
Yeah.
questions. I'm really
Yes.
curious, open my mind, make me think the way you
Yes.
do, especially if you don't believe what I believe,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I'm a big Second Amendment guy. Politically, it's a hot button issue.
Mm.
I will never try to change someone's belief of how they feel,
Yep.
but I will give you an honest, balanced reason why I believe what I believe.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think
That
that's
goes a
the
long way.
basis of any good conversation is like, hey, without trying to change your mind, here's what I believe. Let's meet in the middle. Let's just hear each other out. And
Yes.
that to me is
Exactly.
super important and is something that has been lost in all of
Yes.
this division lately.
All right, man, you're president. Let's go. Let's make this happen. You won my vote. Let's do it. Let's just... And it's weird to me that it isn't obvious when you see someone coming from that viewpoint. Like some people easily just buy into rhetoric and not really question their social awareness. And that makes me wonder too. Like, are people aware? Like, are they socially aware of how what they're saying is true, or is it just words that they're listening to and they believe it? I am with you with that. I am constantly curious, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything you literally just said. I do the exact same thing with people. It's
Well,
remarkable.
for me, it's the scene in Good Will Hunting when they're in the bar and the really pretentious guy from Harvard starts to say, well, if you knew about colonialism and Matt Damon comes up and he's just like, yeah, and then you're going to read this, and then you're going to read this, and then your opinions are going to change like this. I love digging in a little bit with each person just so that I can know how far down the rabbit hole did you go, or are you just
Yes,
spouting Facebook headlines, right? Are
totally.
you a
Yes.
human BuzzFeed right now? You
Yes.
know,
Yeah, and then like you get to a point where you're like, I don't really know if we should get down to that level because maybe they're not ready for that conversation yet.
it all kind of stems from that curiosity, right? So
It does.
thinking about the technology side of all this, you've also developed a ton of tools, all of which are foundational to my retouching, my workflow. From what I understand, you are not a coder yourself, right?
Absolutely
So
not.
how do you build that team? How do you start searching for people that can help you build this
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
and see it through to the end?
This comes from two things. You know, like photographers, we think, oh, we have to do everything ourselves. But then I'm like, think about it this way, right? What CEO is answering emails and customer support and all this stuff? And like it's just a matter of outsourcing. So the reality is it's not even the ideas you have, but it's like, that's why you have to go out and talk to people. You have to go to these conferences, you have to participate in online conversations, you gotta be on this generated than that. And you have to talk and figure out like what are people excited about, right? And along the way, when you put a call out of this is what I love, this is what I like, it's not for people to get in your business, but it's to put out a call signal and say, hey, I want these people around me that also believe in the same thing in retouching photography. And so I don't remember exactly how it began, but the basic principle is I found my core people that, are good at what they do. And whether it being like executing on a code or whether it being like marketing, this goes for beyond just the tool set. Like I have so many people that I work with that don't want to like isolate any one person, but whether it be like, hey, I noticed this person is really good at coding. And then we started working together and being like, and this was my friend Stefan. He was
Yeah.
like, hey, we should make infinite texture together. And he made all these other tools with his team. And I trusted him to just make it. And I was like, I'll talk about it. And then we were on the same page with like how we imagine Photoshop being better. And then same thing with marketing. Like I work with my friend Jeff, and he's really great at marketing. Like my other good friend, my best friend Emily, connected me with Jeff, and then suddenly I was like, "Oh, you're really good at this stuff. You run with that, and just trust people. Sure, it's not going to work out for maybe for first couple of months, but you spend time figuring out what doesn't work. Don't give up on people. Try to see eye to eye. Tell people what you don't like, what you like. Just be open, communicate, put it out there. Again, Matt, like this comes from the curiosity aspect.
Right.
If you're curious about people and their strengths, you can suddenly extrapolate for them. Hey, you would be good at that. Whether they take that or not is a totally different thing. So, like, even you, when you told me, hey, you're doing this course, it's like, that is perfect. You're like the perfect guy for educational content, whether it's podcasts, whether it's editing. It's like, this is your thing. You're meant to talk to people. You could just tell.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. Tell people what they're good at. Don't just wait for likes for your own work. Like go out there, start commenting on Instagram, like on Facebook. Like I love this about your work. You never know what's gonna happen. I remember one time somebody, it was like 9 years later, they messaged me and they go, "Hey, you put like a smiley react on my work, and from then I was motivated to better." And I was like, I don't remember doing that, but even that one little thing changed the course of someone. So you just tell people what you like about their stuff, and you'll be shocked at what that means, what opportunity opens up. And again, like you said, most people are closed-minded. If you recognize people's talents,
Yeah.
tell them. You'll be shocked how people don't. They're not good at recognizing stuff.
I had this conversation with Johnny recently as well, and he's been kind of lamenting the fact that there isn't enough co-support in the creative world, meaning
Yeah.
we all kind of follow each other and we see a lot of the same art. It doesn't take but 2 seconds to leave a comment or a heart or repost it on a story. Like it is a no cost, no frills way to just support the arts. And not enough people do it. All of that kindness, those little things, those little bits of encouragement and support really can mean the world to someone, especially if, like most of us creatives, we're internal and we live in our heads and we think that we're not good enough. And, all the gifts that we're given are wasted because we're not successful like X, Y, and Z. And so those little bits of encouragement really do help. And as long as they're genuine and without
Yes.
expectation and without condition, I think if we did that more, then we might have a more supportive, creative community where these partnerships organically happen.
Yes,
And I
yes.
love the fact that you've been able to foster that with so many different teams. You created if I recall correctly, and I may get this wrong, is there a commercial entity that you're like a creative commune that you developed with like Emily and Brandy and you? Is there like a commercial collaborative in there? I thought I saw something like that
Yes,
get released months ago, right?
yes. So, our friend Blaine, he's a producer, and he had the same thing. He was like, we were talking. I was like, Blaine, just make an agency. I was like, you already a producer. You already know how to pitch. You already know how to, pitch people and emails, all that stuff. Just make an agency. So he made an agency where it was Emily, Felix, my wife Bella, Brandy, a couple other people, and again, same thing happened. It was like this just makes sense.
Yeah.
Just make it happen. And so that's what it was. Is a Blaine and Co. was the agency name.
That's what it was. Yeah. I saw that. I was just like, well, it's about time. It's about time that they did that. Before we get too far off of the tools, I have to say, if there's one tool out of all of them that I've used more than any other, it's the visualizer.
I love it.
More so than infinite color panel or black and white or skin or unify or even the jokes panel, right?
Yeah.
Luma and visualizer are my two biggest tools that I use all the time. Luminosity masking, and then also just the speed and accuracy of visualizer to me is everything. I use that constantly. And whenever Photoshop comes out with an update and breaks it, I freak out until I can get my extensions back or use Rosetta or whatever it is to make it work.
Oh man,
But
I
yeah,
love
thank you for
that.
that.
I
It's
appreciate
amazing.
that. I was curious to hear about like what people like and for what reason, because it helps me to know like, okay, in the future we could do more of that,
Sure.
and maybe we'll make a matte tool that just like has everything that you love to do.
It just looks at you cynically and
Yeah.
just kind of
It
shakes its
just
head,
questions you.
just
Yeah,
questions you. Do you really
silently
want to do
judging.
that? Do you want to use generative fill? You really could just use content aware. You know that, right? Right.
I should do that. Have a little Siri voice in the background. Now they could just monitor what you're doing and interpret exactly what's going on. It figures out your next step. Like, nah, that stray hair should really not go.
Well, I guess you could do it that way, I suppose. No, it was really funny getting back to the neural filters, right? You before I even saw the video, you did what I got to, which is, apply skin smoothing, and then you look at it and you're like, this just doesn't look right. So let's unmask all of the stuff around nose and lips and eyes and all the focus points. And I was like, well, then it doesn't work too badly. And I loved in your
Yeah,
video how you went from this is garbage to, all right, this isn't so bad. And
yeah.
I loved it, like in 4.5 minutes, I saw your whole train of thought go to be like, I guess this is all right.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I'll be honest, before I started recording it, I never had used that filter on that particular image. I wanted just like a raw,
Yeah,
honest feedback because we do that all the time, right? Like,
totally.
we play with something, we're like, oh, this is shit. This is just why did they who put the green light
Which
on
tool is
this?
that, Pratik?
Yeah, I know, right? We'll have to find out.
Even in that, right? This comes back to that reliance on the tools. It's great that Photoshop comes out with generative AI. Sure, it's going to give you 11 fingers on one hand. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm seeing people become reliant on it for backdrops or removing objects. And I'm like, if you don't have the proper skill or foundation to know how to do it without that,
Yes.
it's great if it works and it creates efficiency, but at least build the skill.
Yes.
It's kind of
100%.
like, oh, I want a new desk. I'm going to go to IKEA and get a tabletop and 4 legs. Or you can understand how to put a table together yourself and maybe make the legs, or you don't have to do it, but at least understand the process of it. For me, it's that I don't want to be reliant on anything until I know how to do it manually,
Mm.
you know?
100, yes. And also the
And
manipulation of the results too, where even if you get something you like, what if you're like, I want a variation of that, or like
right.
at least massage it to your own style.
While we're talking about retouching, I did have one question. I figure it would probably be a horrible podcast if I had you on and didn't ask something about retouching. We, especially folks that just start getting into it, right? They might buy the retouching series and they go through all the stuff with you, and now they know how to do everything. What do you find that people overdo when they're beginning, and in the commercial world probably really isn't that big of a deal?
Yeah.
Meaning, there are some people that get every single flyaway or every single eyelash. Where do you draw the line between this is what's needed for commercial and this is good enough?
First thing is, I notice when everyone jumps into retouching, they go straight into frequency separation and just blur the skin. That's the first thing everyone's like, I'm just gonna do that and be done. And I'm like, ooh, and here's the problem with that, right? Like, it probably is gonna be fine for most people in Instagram and social media. But the issue is, let's say you're an art director, let's say you're Blaine and Co. and you're like looking through people's work. And the ones that matter the most are going to know for sure. So it really depends on time versus quality. And it goes back to the IKEA principle is know the processes, know the whys. Because once you know the whys and the processes, you can decide for yourself, hey, maybe just like the neural filter, I do a little bit of this, but pull it back and a little bit of that. And that's been my ethos is learn everything, but then apply it to the standard that honors your vision, because like your vision has to match. And I say this also because even with AI tools, like I'll use some of these new AI dodge and burn tools and whatever, and a lot of the times they do a pretty good job. But off the bat, I noticed it wasn't like my style, and I could tell. Like if everyone's using this one tool, I know what that tool's now going to look like and has a very identifiable marker. It's like camera sensor. Sometimes you can just tell what's shot with what, and it has identifiable mark to it. Same thing with retouching. If you just rely on this one tool that everyone will look the same, you're not going to stand out anymore. You are literally washed out. Your vision is washed out. So, have an understanding. IKEA principle. I think that's what we should hashtag it. IKEA principle. Like
IKEA principle.
Yeah. Learn the legs,
I can't even sit here and be like, oh, I never did that. I was a portrait pro, dude, and I'd move all the sliders at the beginning. And I was like, let's just turn this person into a China doll because that looks fantastic. Once you realize, it looks like hot garbage, then you start to scale things back and learn a little bit more. I love the fact that in one of your posts on the futurist.ai Instagram account that you have, I went all the way back to the very first one. And it's really funny if you go to this Instagram account, futurist.ai, you can see all of Pratik's work as he explores a lot of this like Mid-Journey and DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and whatnot. And it's really interesting to go back to the beginning and see just how kind of cruddy it was. You said in that post that the creative credit belongs to AI. I'm just the director. And that to me summed up everything about AI. The creation is happening in this engine, but it comes down to the direction that you give it that is the quality result. And you can't be of the mindset that I put this prompt in, made something, now I'm a digital artist. You're a digital director, perhaps, but you're not Becca Bjorky who can make a Stargate mermaid by hand. That was a really poignant statement that the creation belongs to AI and you're just directing it in a certain way. I absolutely love the way that you sum that up.
And it's crazy to think that was probably what, a year ago. Then and suddenly now it's photoreal, and it's so strange to do that. And the reason I'm glad you brought that up, because the reason I initially made that statement was because I knew at that moment when I made that account, I knew two things. After that moment, everyone else was going to make a .ai Instagram account, which happened. And then the second thing was that people were going to accuse me of being the artist, because it was very hotly debated at that moment, like more than ever. We just kindled the flame, and everyone was saying, how could you use AI and how it's, immediately. And I was like, listen, I fully acknowledge that I have no part in the creation of this, but I also acknowledge that it's my direction that also kindled that fire. So, we are directors of our thing, and we are going to progress towards that as the tool become no more barriers to entry anymore. We're going to start seeing everyone's visions come, the director vision come out, and it's going to be very fascinating to see what people's minds are like.
To kind of land this plane, I think watching the course, The Future of Photo, hearing Felix say that, yeah, AI may change some things. Maybe it makes headshots easier, right? We're seeing that now with, these high school headshots and whatnot. And there are even companies that are popping up that are producing headshots for you. Yeah, that may take a segment of the industry that photographers generally rely on out of the picture. However, it will never replace the experience of working with someone. And that to me really hit home as well. And to hear that from someone like Felix and to hear you guys discussing this, that, yeah, AI is going to become part of all of what we do. And it is going to change how we work. Again, the adapt or die situation, but it's never going to replace the experience for the human sitting across from you.
Never.
And
That's true.
our responsibility is to maintain vigilance in explaining that to people.
Yes.
That, yes, these tools are available. Use them. Go do what it's going to be good enough for your LinkedIn profile. However, it's never going to replace the experience that you have in exploring yourself and how you feel and working with a photographer and just all the emotions that go along with that. That's irreplaceable. And that will, in my opinion, never be replicated by bits and bytes and ones and zeros.
Exactly. Unless like the movie Equilibrium, where they just know all our emotions, like our emotions are the reason we need to connect socially. Like we have to connect. That's why you're listening to this conversation,
Right.
and that's why we're talking right now. That's the motivate. That's the grind motivator for humanity. Is the interconnections we have as people. That's why we went nuts during COVID. And that's why you're never gonna see anyone going, this is my AI newborn baby. Like you're gonna want photos of your baby. Like you're not gonna throw it in AI and be like, this is my mid-journey baby. You know what I mean? Like
I'm going to make a note now on Facebook and I'll save your post. So when 2030 in 7 years or 6 years in a month, I'm going to check and I'm going to see if we've cured cancer and heart disease and we've got flying cars and whatnot, see if any of that prediction is true, or if it's just going to be some dystopian universe where, we're all living off grid because there's one robot that's farming humans somewhere in Paducah, Kentucky.
God.
I have no idea how this is going to go, but I'm in for the ride one way or another.
If anyone's listening to this, I want your 2030 predictions. Put it down right now. I want to know what you think is going to happen.
I assure you, you will get probably at least one. I can't guarantee how many listeners there are going to be, but I will at least put that input in anonymously and make you feel good about it.
Make other profiles. Come on, you can do this.
Am I going to see you out at WPPI?
I think so. Yeah,
Good.
depending
Fantastic.
on where we are, I'm definitely going to see you there.
Yeah, I know you have a lot of things going on. You're going to Namibia. You'll be kind of bouncing all around. Does that all kind of happens around the same time frame? So I was curious if you're going to be out in Vegas where everybody else is, or if you're going to be gallivanting, creating phenomenal art like you always do.
We'll all be together in Vegas, that's for sure.
I really look forward to seeing you, man. And thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight. It's rare that I get to have these conversations about AI like this, that's someone that's so into it like I am. So I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you for being so curious, for fostering the communities that you do, and for sharing all of this with me. Man, I really, really appreciate your time, man.
My pleasure. If it wasn't for people having platforms to let us talk about all of our nerdy tendencies, then where would we be, right?
Say hi to Bella for me, and I'll talk to you soon.
You bet, man. Thank you.